So all right, well, I guess now I'm actually live. I guess I wasn't live prior to this, so I'm sorry about that misunderstanding. As I said, I'm experimenting a little bit with YouTube. Anyway, thank you very much for joining me. I'm going to start over again, and I am today talking about how to use busing and iZotope Neutron in order to facilitate mixing for production music specifically. So this could be film scoring, it could be writing production music for film and TV, could be like writing cues and tracks like that for background music. And there are two main considerations that I bring from my experience. So I did run a commercial studio for many years. I do know how to mix on traditional equipment. I've had a lot of experience with both analog gear and then the transition into digital. I've been using Cubase for almost 2 decades. In that time, what I've learned, and I think many engineers would agree with me, is that mixing is about organizing what's important at any point in time in your workflow. What is important now or what's important later? Not just in the mix, like you might have piano, beautiful piano that's more important in the early stages, and you might have big brass that's more important in the later stages, but not just that. Also in the process of mixing, making sure that, hey there, Peter, thank you so much for joining me. So just making sure that when you're actually working on the mix, you have a clear purpose, a clear focus. So let's take a scenario that really paints this in a clear light. Let's say that you've got, as I do here, an orchestral piece, right? So I've got this going on. I've got strings, I've got brass, I've got winds, I've got maybe percussion, I've got some piano, things like that, harps. And if I've got 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 tracks of instruments in here, which isn't uncommon because I may only have violins, but I'll have 2 or 3 libraries of violins, I'll have many different tracks running. How can I possibly be expected to make a good decision on just the violin when there's so much else to keep my eye on? This is where busing, the first major topic that I want to encourage you all to add into your workflow or incorporate into your workflow efficiently. Busing is essentially taking, say, all the strings and breaking them into, or sending them down a bus, sending them down kind of one chute where you can process it. Now, for large families of instruments like strings or winds, I'll traditionally have like high strings, low strings. Maybe separate out the reeds from the flutes in the wind section. Separating out the horns maybe from the rest of the brass. Things like that that will allow me then to make cohesive decisions that help me stay focused on one thing at a time. Now, there are 2 steps to making a decision on what to do, let's say, with the horns. The first is EQ, and there I have to look at, well, what is competing with the horns? Is the, let's say, in this kind of an arrangement, I'm definitely going to have the mid-range in the strings and the lower mid-range of the winds competing with the horns, depending on the horn's range, but assuming they're playing their sort of sweet spot range. So I've only got a certain amount of space in the EQ, sort of the realm from lowest pitch we can hear to highest pitch we can hear. There's a range that right now in a raw mix, the horns are there, the strings are there, the wind's there, maybe percussion like timpani's there, maybe harp is there, piano's there, not to mention synthesizers, which are almost certainly there, maybe even choir, which is certainly there. And I actually have to make a decision as a mixing engineer now, not just as a composer, that this region here is going to be for the horns, this different region here is going to be for the strings, this different region here is going to be for the winds, and so on and so forth. That's a lot easier to do when you can compare them. So let me show you a little bit about how I go about doing that. First of all, I have all of my instruments. You can see here from my instruments view that I have a tremendous number of instruments. So lots and lots and lots and lots of instruments. These aren't even all of them. I didn't even have them all there. So these are all my instruments. I want to have everything there. So everything except the purple ones here. It's a massive, massive collection. And so everything, basically, every instrument runs into a stem. And the stems are just these purple things: flute, reeds, brass, so on and so forth. All these purple ones, there's still quite a lot of them. I don't use all of them on every mix. Let's see which ones are happening. All right, so these ones are happening. Okay, so I can see right away these 6 tracks are being used a lot. They're probably not the only ones. But being able to focus on 6 buses is going to be way, way, way more effective. Hey, Peter, yeah, it might just be you and me today, so we'll see how this goes, but hopefully some other people will join. So in this view, I can right away make effective comparisons. I know that I've got strings high and low. I know I've got reeds high, flutes, horns. So almost certainly the strings high and the flutes and the reeds high, those are going to be competing with each other. As a mixing engineer now, I'm sort of taking off my composer hat and putting on my mixer engineer hat. I want to clean that up. So how am I going to do that? Well, I'm going to start by using just the basic channel settings, and I am going to say, okay, these are my flutes, and when I play them back here, I can see this nice EQ sort of spectrum graph here showing me about the frequencies that are being used. But I want to make sure that they are not competing with, let's say, the strings. So I'm going to also select here strings high. Let me make sure I'm looking at the right thing. I'm going to go with strings high. You can see the blue and the orange overlaid with each other. Now, I'm not going to actually mix this live because it's too time consuming. I really just wanted to offer a perspective on how you could mix rapidly, how you can mix quickly. So being able to compare what the flutes are doing with the strings, seeing it there, then I can make adjustments to the EQ curve appropriately. Now, once I've got everything mixed sort of individually, I've got these stems mixed, and I want to reiterate because I'm not sure I mentioned it, I don't put any effects on anything except my stems. I don't do any effects, I don't do EQ, I don't do high pass filters, low pass filters, anything on any track except my stems. And every instrument goes to a stem. None of them go directly to my mix bus, none of them. They might go there indirectly through the reverb, that's kind of a different issue, but all my instruments go to a stem, and every stem goes to the main mix, and I only do processing on my stems. So I'm only ever going to really be running effects on a relatively small number of tracks. So let's imagine we move forward here, and I've been able to use the EQ comparison to make some intelligent choices and sculpt my EQ, giving each of the stems their own space. Now I need to do that thing for the whole mix, and that's where Neutron comes in. So this is kind of the second phase of what I wanted to present, which is Neutron. Again, I am not trying to sell products here. I'm not trying to do product reviews. I've done this for a long time, and these tools are, in my view, they're not necessarily the best, I won't say. It's just that they are the quickest that I've found. They help me make decisions very rapidly, and the investment has been worth it for me because I've saved so many thousands of hours. So let's talk a little bit about how I do that. So let's say I've got these highlighted tracks, right? And I'm going to go ahead now into my master bus, and I'm going to open up this plugin called Tonal Balance. And I'm going to use one of its presets. I can create my own presets, like I've created this contemplative underscore. You can actually go and have Tonal Balance consume either an audio file or a folder of audio files to generate this target curve, which I can then use. But there are also presets that come with the software, one of which is this orchestral too. So I'm going to use this. And what this is telling me is that I want my mix, when it's done, to kind of be sitting in this range. And if it is, then the tonal balance is going to be appropriate. So let's do this. All right, it's looking pretty good. Now this does already have some mixing on it. But let's say that I notice, okay, there's an area here in my upper mids where the mix is kind of blowing out a little bit. So there's a little too much high mids there. and I want to fix that. So how I'm going to do that, and again, this is where the time saving really comes in. On every one of my stems, I have a Neutron EQ. I also have relay. I'll take a second just to explain what those do. In Neutron, which is made by iZotope, they have this sort of feature they call IPS, I think. It stands for like Inter-Plugin Service or something like that. Anyway, the idea is that plugins that are on other remote channels within the project can talk to each other. So the relay plugin, all it does is it's like a gain. It's a fader. It's like a second fader on each track, because you'll notice that I don't have any of my faders. They're all at unity. All relay does is it talks to the visual mixer and it reports back on its level. And the visual mixer, which I'm not talking about today, is a tool that just basically automatically sets levels. So it just sets a fader level for each one of the relays on my stems and kind of balances the mix for me very quickly. It's very helpful. Hey there, Rich. I am running Neutron 4 here, so I have not sprung for 5 yet as far as I could see. It didn't offer me any features, but I'm open for questions on 4. Yeah, that's what I'm presenting here. So I've got my tracks, I've got my stems basically mixed. I'm now at the point on the master track where I'm trying to make decisions about balancing them out. I've got this nice curve here. Let me take myself off the screen. I've got this nice response curve in tonal balance control, which is part of the iZotope Neutron package. And it's telling me with the blue what the desirable range is for this preset, whether it's one that I made myself or it's one of the factory installed ones. And as I'm playing back, I'm noticing that there's some high mids here that are kind of creeping outside my desired range. So how am I going to solve that? I'm actually going to use not the relay but the Neutron EQ, which is on each one of my stems. And the Neutron EQ looks like this, you know, but I can also pull it up here, and this is what the IPS or Inter-Plugin Service does. I can open this up here. This would be Woods Insert 2. Actually, let's make sure. Actually, I'm going to step back one step, and I'm going to change my selection to make sure that we are really just looking at make sure that we are looking at a section of the music that okay, that's what I want. So I'm going to just loop that. I'm actually going to turn the music down for a minute. We can still see the meters, but this way it won't drive you crazy, just the constant repetition. And we can see that up here, this curve is not working for us. So I'm going to go down here. I'm going to look up. Actually, we do need to listen just for a second here, because I'm going to actually solo this high mids area. So that's all in the strings. I can tell by soloing it that that's all in the strings. So I'm going to come back to my mixer here, and I'm going to look at just my stems. I'm going to look at my strings high, and I'm going to bring up that Neutron EQ right here in this select source. Oops, sorry. So I'm looking down for strings high. You can see I've got quite a lot in them here. Strings high EQ. All right. And what we can see if we are actually looking at the EQ on that track is that it's identical, right? So these two things, the way that these nodes are configured here and the way that these nodes are configured here is exactly the same. And if I move one, it moves the other, as you can see. So now I can see this is coming up over here. I'm going to bring this little shelf down. Bring down my volume again so it doesn't drive you all crazy. And as I do this, I'm basically trying to make changes in my strings to bring these down. Now, that may not be the only place that it's coming from. I feel like if I'm doing that dramatic of an EQ shift, it may not be all in my strings high. So I may look in my strings low because it may be in some of, there may be something going on in there. We can see that is also, I have horns and flutes. So let's go to my flutes. I'll again find it in my list here. And I go to flutes EQ. And I'm going to bring up the volume again. I'm going to listen. Option key and I sweep, I can actually hear specific frequency ranges, which is really nice. So I make changes with the EQ directly there. In this case, since it is only partially responding to that, I may need to do something a little bit more severe like compression. However, the integration between this Neutron EQ and tonal balance to be able to see my target curve and also make adjustments to the EQ curve for a specific stem is really a game changer, really a crucial part of my workflow when it comes to doing this quickly. And in order to do this, I have to have buses set up correctly. So just to review, every instrument goes to a bus. None of them go directly to the master. Everything, goes to a stem. I call them stems for the purposes of the kind of music that I produce, but they're essentially just buses or groups, as they're called in Cubase. All the stems, they go to the main mix, all right? So I can just rely on the fact that there's no weird plugins anywhere in my project except on stems or on the master bus. And I generally mix such that I don't have very much processing at all on the master bus. But I do use tonal balance control on the master bus, looking at the EQs that are on individual stems to go in and make these fine-tune choices. I will go in sometimes like this. I might have to go in and put some multiband compression on it. But it's extremely fast. It's extremely efficient. And that's a really key for me as a media composer because I always have to produce music that has a professional mix. And what sounds right to me in my room, what sounds right to even my ears, my tastes, is not always going to be the right mix. Right? I might have a mix like this and I think, yeah, I don't know. I mean, my ear wants more highs. And that's not going to be what the client wants. The client wants something that matches this curve because probably this curve is going to be more appropriate for sitting under dialogue in film or TV where dialogue is occupying that high mid-range, right? So it's not always about the music sounding exactly like an orchestra. Sometimes it's about it sounding like an orchestra but making room for the dialogue, and that's where having this curve really speeds things up. I don't have to like come up with a mix I like, send it off, get the feedback that that mix needs to change, hope and guess that I get the changes right, etc. Back and forth, wasting everybody's time and making the process kind of laborious. I hope that that's helped. Please do like and subscribe if you are new to this channel. I know that people watching right now are not new, and I really appreciate you guys joining. So let me, yeah, sorry about that, Peter. I appreciate your comment, and I am going to look into this. You may have made a comment about it on another video, and I do appreciate that. So what you're saying is that when I play the music, it just overshadows my voice too much. And I can go in here on my local mixer and make sure that when I speak, it sort of ducks the music and fix that. I haven't had time to, but thank you for the feedback because that's really constructive, and I will do that. So for sure. If you have any other questions once the video is done, please do post them in the comments. If you have things that you'd like me to cover, also please feel free to post them in the comments. And I look forward to seeing you guys all on Monday. Hope you have a great weekend. All right, bye for now.